Cool. Thank you so much for being here today. It is the October DPI show and tell. We've got some fantastic people lined up to tell you about what they've been doing with the DPI funding and their progress. Really looking forward to hearing more from them. I mentioned a little bit before, but if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. This is here for you to have a discussion about what's happening, give each other feedback, and carry on that discussion outside of this. So just as a reminder, we've got these people. You've probably seen these faces a lot now as the people here to support you with your projects. A little bit more about why we're here for show and tell, and just showing what you've been doing in flight work. Any point to jump in with questions, ideas, feedback for people. For Ella and Benjamin, can I hand over to you guys?
Yeah, that's cool.
Brilliant. Just let me know when you want to move on to the next slide.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Ella King. I'm the Statutory Services Admin Lead here at Be First, and I'm joined by my colleague from the Council, Benjamin Wedlake. Next slide. Cool. So Be First, if anyone doesn't know, we are a regeneration company wholly owned by the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham Council. And one of the many things we do is we cover the statutory planning services. So like planning applications, we cover some building control, land charges, street naming and numbering, things like that. And I guess one of the big things that we are known for is being top nationally for determinations in time. So you just click next. That's the table that we always show. So we are a high performing planning team, but we are quite lean, and that means that we aren't always able to cover everything in as much detail as we want. So if you flick to the next slide. With the Digital Planning Improvement Fund, it's really given us a chance to have a look at our data, see where we're at, and think going forwards how we'll better maintain data once we get it up to standard. Unknowingly to us, we had also been working towards providing some of this data in the schema through work with Plan X. So we were lucky in the fact that we had sort of looked over it and had begun to work towards that anyway. So our Article 4 data and conservation area data is already up. But with looking through the Digital Planning Improvement Fund, it really did flag up issues that we had with mainly our TPO data, so our true preservation order data just wasn't historically maintained to a standard that it should have been. And that's been our main focus since starting work on the project. My colleague Ben has been doing a lot of work sorting out the situation with the trees, and we've come up with quite an innovative method of doing our desk-based survey of the trees. And that's also a shout out to Richard, who's also done a lot of work in the GIS aspect. If you just go to the next slide. Cool. So now I'll just hand over to my colleague, Ben, if he's on the call.
Yeah, thank you. Guys, I'm just going to share my screen. So I've got a couple of slides, that's all. Can I just double check and see a big red screen?
Yep.
Brilliant, thank you. So, yeah, I'm Ben Wedlake. I've sort of been the GIS officer at the Borough for about 2-3 years now. Prior to that, I spent the last 20 years in the GIS industry, either in the military, local government, utility, and yeah, been around the block really. With the presentation, we'll sort of just quickly run through how we sort of use GIS at the Borough, the solution we sort of put in place for this project, and then sort of run through the case study of TPO data. So yeah, predominantly we've sort of been using Esri software for the last 14 years. Typical business cases where it's managing the land area, any sort of asset management system, and then also then the bespoke products. So Be First, the visualization of the Revit models, various dashboards to see performance data, emergency response applications as well. And yeah, just every day something new comes in and we try and put a solution in place. With that in mind, then what we sort of done was we put in a planning solution. So all our data sort of sits in Azure SQL Server. we publish all the map services with an ArcGIS server. So that creates lots of APIs. With that APIs, then we've embedded, like Ella said, conservation areas, Article 4s, listed buildings into the Open Systems Lab PlanX platform. So the idea is they just connect to our API, they import that into their app. So then when we update any data in LBVD, the changes will come through to them. And then what we've got up and running as well for the general members of the public, just to save them getting in touch with us. So if they have any queries, they can just go to this application that's sort of public facing, and then they can sort of see all the planning data there as well. So this is sort of the solution we put in place at the moment. The only thing we've really got outstanding is the TPO data. So yeah, there's a bit of a requirement, review the TPO data, notice there's a lot of changes that have taken place over time, and there's not really been any change management within the data source. So we had a bit of a project where we sort of went through the TPOs. We're quite a small borough, so there was only about 130, 140 to look at. Sort of extracted the mapping, georeference, so we put the map in a real world place, captured the data, whether it be a tree or polygon, and then we sort of attributed as per the PlanX schema. With that, then it was a case of done some mass updating. So, you know, rather than putting the address and the UPRN, sort of done some spatial intersects just to save time as well. So that's what sort of created the TPO data. The next aspect then was sort of trying to support with desktop studies. With the desktop studies, as you can sort of see here, we use a combination. There's a product called National Tree Map. With National Tree Map, yeah, it's sort of an image classification where Blue Sky sort of every 2-3 years update the data set, extract the trees, the heights, and they create this data set. So for our borough, it's roughly about £500-600 to get every tree within the borough. So that's sort of supported with our sort of our green infrastructure system as well. So what we use Confirm, and what we did then, we just created a map or a visual for every TPO. And as you can sort of see here, our TPO document covers that, you know, there's a batch of trees there on the western side, but there's a big building there at the moment. So there's probably been some sort of planning or something that's mitigated knocking all these trees down. But there's a reason now to take this TPO back and sort of update there. And we sort of done this for all our TPOs with a manual review. And then we sort of referred these to the tree officer. We'll either, in some aspects, possibly cancel the TPO or update the mapping, update the documentation within. Yeah, and that's sort of just a case study that we've been through the TPO. So that's where we're at, really. All the data is live, ready to go as well, and it's in the app. So yeah, thank you. That's pretty much everything in a nutshell. So just stop sharing now, guys. So I don't know if you want to share your PowerPoint slides again. I don't know if you have any questions, guys, or if you're happy to jump on to the next presentation.
Thanks so much.
There's
one
question from Steve. Steve,
sorry, I didn't check the chat.
It's all right. No, that's what we're here for.
Yep.
Steve, do you want to come on and just pose it?
Yeah, no, it was just you said it was about £500 for a London borough. Is that's just based on the area of the borough, I'm guessing?
They do the number of trees.
Oh, do they? Oh, okay. Interesting.
I'll in the chat, guys, I'll just drop in yeah, the link really. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Blue Sky. Obviously with the aerial photography, we get that free just through the PSGA, or it's changed 50 times. Apologies, I probably said it wrong. So yeah, we get the aerial photography for free, but yeah, with the tree map then. And let me put another link in as well, just a bit of information. So yeah, share my screen here. So I don't know if you guys have seen that, but yeah, so effectively within the London borough, you put in your area, it'll select all the trees, export there. But for our borough, it's about £500-600. But it's really quick. Just if you just drop a shape file in, it'll give you a rough price for your area as well.
I think also with all this work that's been done now, we're still not fully finished with the TPOs in terms of if anyone has suggestions of good companies that we could reach out to regarding getting an in-person survey on the TPOs that we know have failed this first desk-based assessment, or TPOs that look like they need varying, things like that. we would really appreciate any contacts there. It's also a case of now knowing the best practice going forward to revoke or vary any of these TPOs, because it's not something that we as BEFIRST have done in a very long time. So yeah, we would appreciate any guidance on that, and we are in the TPO working group for that sort of reason too. Yeah, and I guess the final takeaway is that the Digital Planning Improvement Fund project and that work that's being seen by senior management team on that project has renewed interest in other sort of digital projects within the council or within BEFIRST. So we're looking at View City. We're trying to progress much more rapidly with Plan X, and also look at AI solutions, but we're not quite there yet. But Croydon's presentation is definitely something we're going to be looking into.
Sounds like an excellent segue. Thank you so much for sharing. It's really great to see. And I'm going to just take us back to Jan's presentation. Now he's here and all set up, ready to go. But yeah, if you've got any further questions, then please do pop it in the chat and reach out to Ella and Ben on Slack as well. But yes, I will share again my slides for Jan.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm going to talk about two things today. So we're right at the beginning of our sort of transformation journey, and we're sort of exploring several things. So I'm going to talk about two things. One is about trees. But before we come on to that, I'm just going to talk about a few things we've done, sort of messing around with AI tools. So if you want to go to the next slide and then the one after. So the first thing that we've trialed doing is using Copilot to redact documents. So we get planning applications which have lots and lots of public interest in Croydon. All of the objectives go on our website, but we don't put the objections on the website like a lot of boroughs, because a lot of them contain sensitive data, and we've got GDPR issues, etc. So we've looked at a sort of typical application. We've got a large application that's got 1,100 objections. Someone's done the FOI, said, can we see all these objections, please? So that means that we have to manually go through those and redact them. So this application we looked at had took 6 hours of office time. We put a sort of fake version of it through Copilot because we didn't want to be putting real data through. And we found it would take about 30 minutes for the AI model to do everything, and for someone to then go through and have a quick skim through and just check whether it's actually got it right or not. So there are some risks with doing things this way. I think firstly, the AI models needed a bit of sort of warming up and very clear instructions. And then the second thing that we found, which I'll show you, is that we found that they're slightly over redacting sometimes or getting things wrong. So if people are asking actually for transparency, they're then coming back to us and saying, hang on, why have you redacted all of this information? What are you hiding from us? So we're having to balance that, sort of being transparent and giving people the information with not being able to release sensitive information. We put this through several times, and we've had to really refine the questions that we're asking, because otherwise the redactions are not great. So we've had to say exactly what it is. So this document contains consultation responses. We've used ICO Information Commissioner Office standards, which are the GDPR standards, which identify personal and sensitive data. We've then also had to include any data which identifies where someone lives, because it wasn't redacting that information, and any information about protected characteristics, because it wasn't doing that. We also found a couple of instances where actually it was removing the data or just editing, and obviously what we want from this is redacted data, not edited data. We want the actual data to come through. So we've had to be very clear that we want it to be redacted. So if you go to the next slide, this is what it's pulled out. So it's actually those yellow things I highlighted. It's removed the racist comment, it's removed the address, the kids' names and the schools, but it's also removed all the street names. So this is the best. We've tried several different ways of doing this. We've also tried several different models. We've tried Claude, we've tried ChatGPT, and we've tried Copilot. So we're sort of getting there, but this definitely isn't ready for us to do anything with. And I think what we're realizing is really this needs some sort of customized app rather than just putting this through a language model, which is probably a slightly bigger piece of work. So next slide. So our takeaways from this are that we've trialed something, it needs further testing. I think our view is that we probably need a proper setup rather than having to type in loads of questions and refine things every time we're doing it, because that just increases the scope for error. We have found that actually the results that we're getting are probably accurate for GPDR purposes, so we're not likely to release something by accident and get a £17.5 million fine. But if people are asking for information about development and people are saying, I don't like this elevation, they sort of want to know, well, which elevation are they talking about? So it's not ready for us to actually sort of put it into practice. Next slide. So we've also trialed a few other things using this. So we've written job adverts. We've tried doing draft responses to complaints where we've got very, very long complaints. Sometimes we get sort of 20, 30 page long complaints. So actually just being able to distill those sort of cuts corners for us. Mailing lists where we've been unable to use mail merges, and also Excel formulas is really useful when you're trying to do data analysis, look at officer caseloads, that sort of thing. But the other thing is that we're also quite conscious that we've been sort of doing some ad hoc testing with not real data, and that we need some proper governance in place to be able to do this. So we've been talking to our digital services team, and I think we're probably going to pause until we've got some proper governance in place. So the next thing is similar to what Ella and Ben have just talked about. So TPO data. So next slide, please. So we've actually got over 2,000 TPOs in Croydon, some of which date from the 1960s. None of them were digital. They're all on paper, and a lot of those, because they've been maybe made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, some of those trees will be 40, 50 years old. They might not exist anymore. So we can't just be digitizing the sort of the drawings that we've got from 50 years ago. We need to actually make sure the data we're producing is accurate. So next slide. So we've got some TPOs which are sort of groups and woodland orders where actually we need to go out and survey the trees and work out which ones are of value and which ones aren't. Next slide. And then we've got some where we've got a mix of trees and groups and all sorts of things. So I'm going to focus on this one where you can see on the plan there are three TPOs, T1, T2, T3, and then there's a group on this sort of screen. So next slide, this is what it looks like. So we can see those sort of three trees are there, and then there's also something to the north of it. And what we're using is a tool called View City, which is a mapping software. I think that they're in 26 cities now. A lot of you may have used them for things like verified views. We use them for our tall building study, and we've used them for reviewing planning applications for tall buildings. They've mapped London and several other cities to an accuracy of 15 centimeters. And one thing they've also included is trees, which is really useful for us. So next slide, this is how the trees come out in View City. So we can see actually, rather than having that aerial photo, we can actually see there are three trees to the bottom of the screen, and then there are sort of 3 or 4 to the north of that in that green. And they've actually gone out with scanners and actually mapped all of these, so we know that they're accurate. Next slide. You can also helpfully take the leaves off the trees. They've estimated they measure the heights of the trees, and they've put in these sort of sticks. That's what they've measured, and then they just added the leaves as a graphic. And then next slide. So they've actually got all of these geolocated. So what we're trying to do is to go back to that TPO that we had, where we know there are 3 trees. We can actually take their data, and we are confident that they went out and scanned all of these in 2021. These are accurate enough to 15 centimeters. And we can actually say, okay, these 3 trees, we know exactly where they are. We can now plot them on a map without having to go out and measure them. So there will be some that are less accurate than this, or there will be some sort of woodland orders where actually the data's not there. There will also be some, so when we looked at the plan here, we had 3 TPOs and then a group. When we look on View City, we can see, okay, there are 3 trees here in the right locations, and then there's a group to the north of them. That makes sense. There will also be somewhere we look at the TPO on paper and we compare it to what's on View City, and we say, oh, that's not right. But what we're really hoping to do is not to have to go out and measure 2,000 TPOs again, but actually see how many of those we can get through this system, how many we can map to a degree of accuracy that we're comfortable with, and then how many of those we then need to go out and check and do manually. But we're hoping that that will be a much smaller number. Obviously, we're nowhere near, I think it was 130 that Barking Dagenham have got. So obviously we would love to have that number coming from 2000. So next slide. We're obviously at the beginning of this. We have actually scanned all of our TPOs, so they're no longer in a cupboard. They're now in a computer. They've all got files. They're all in iDocs. They've all got references, but they're not accurately plotted, and there's no CAD files. And then the steps that we've identified next is we need to then go through and review all of these using the CAD files from ViewCity. We need to work out which ones are sort of more recent, which ones we know are accurate. If we've made them in the last 3 years, we know we don't really need to check those. Older TPOs will go through using ViewCity and other data. I'm really interested in speaking to Ella about Blue Sky and seeing if there's something else that that we can do there to sort of combine the two or sort of add value to the process. And then obviously we will have to then go out. Our tree officers will have to go out and visit them, but it'll be a smaller number. And we're hoping that this is going to make a mammoth manual task into something that we can actually do within the budget. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jan. It's really interesting. Thanks for sharing. Has anyone got any questions for Jan? We've got one through on the chat. Nat, did you want to talk through that one?
Did we add the TPO into iDocs manually, or is there a batch upload tool available? I have no idea. I can check with my colleagues and get back to you. I don't actually know how we did that.
Great, thanks. And then we've got one from Ben as well. We reduced a 30-day survey program that required site visits to 1-day GIS desk study. This provided an estimated saving of £9,600, and that was a response to your question, Steve, in the chat. Okay, Laura, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Laura Pridder-Brune. I work for Greater Cambridgeshire Planning, which is a shared service between South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City. If you go to the next slide. So just get some stats up there for everyone to see sort of the area we cover and the sort of numbers, so the planning applications and comments we receive. And on the right hand side, it's just how many listed building conservation areas, the areas that we're looking at, the TPOs and Article 4s. So we're dealing with quite sort of a large amount of data in quite a large area. And obviously you've got South Cambs, which is like the donut really around Cambridge, and I think it is the only planning English district planning that completely encircles another council. So it does kind of make sense that we become a shared service really for planning. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so when we were formed back in 2019, we came together as a shared service, and then we were kind of getting all our processes and everything together, and then March 2020 we all were sent home. So it created a massive problem for us. We had 2 different teams working in different ways, and we needed to bring those together sort of quite quickly. We had really sort of differences in ways of working. There was procedures that everyone had on bits of paper at home that they made their own notes on the different things in different ways. We had 2 different council networks because they're not unitary, it's still 2 separate councils. And the data quality and access to performance data just wasn't really good enough. And the data quality, I think that I really want to sort of highlight today, particularly as now we're on this digital journey with ODP. It's really kind of shown just we need this good quality data and we need that going forward. So it's not just correcting the back data, the historic data, it's really looking at what we're doing now to make sure that any data going into the system is consistent and in a really good state. So I wanted to share really what we've come up with and how we're using that going forward. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so the solution is we created a planning wiki on SharePoint. and this is growing by the day. It's becoming more and more of a sort of huge resource for us. It's accessible, it's searchable, it's all controlled with different versions. We can embed different contents. If there's a new starter, we can just sort of point them in this direction and then do some training and sort of hold their hand step by step. And it's just been this sort of amazing resource for us. So this is it. This is our front home wiki. And you can see we've got some performance stats. We've got some recently updated pages. So if there's any updates, people can immediately see. We've got some quick links. So we've got our organisation chart, communication standards, the things that we kind of want people to notice. And then within each subdirectory, we hold all the procedures, literally step by step. So if I just click on applications for planning, you can see here that we have every step of the process. It's all color coded, so depending on what role you're in, you know what you're meant to be clicking on. So if you just go into one of these, you can see here it's screenshots, and they are literally step by step of what you need to be doing in order to do that step of the process. One area that we've recently been doing some training in, which was enforcement, planning compliance, and you can see we've put videos in there as well of their spatial training. So if anyone missed it or if they want to go back and just look again, they can. We've got things like land charges, so we've even embedded garners in there. They've sent a digital copy now, so we've got that. So it really is kind of like one-stop shop for anything we're doing. Now we're looking a lot at trees at the moment, like everybody else. Our tree data, we've got Cambridge City and South Cambs District Council trees, both in very different states. We are using uniform for both. So now we're going through and we're actually capturing everything within the trees, all the information they need, and then hopefully we'll be able to, as we go on, be able to capture that data. Just another thing I wanted to highlight as well, we've got a reports gallery. So in here, we've got all of our KPIs. You can see our performance comes up, and this is live data coming out of the uniform system. I'm screen sharing, it might be a little bit slow to load, but it comes up eventually. So, and say this is quite interactive as well, so you can click on it and see different stats. So we've sort of built it, but it's like anything, still a work in progress. I've got some sort of ideas on what we'd like to do next. We're very much looking at how our officers are using GIS. So we'd like to do some GIS training and create a little section on here on sort of how you can use it to the best ability depending on what you're doing. We're also looking at possibly creating a members portal. So for our training for like planning committees and things like that, we'll have a section so for members to go into, and they can see some sort of top tips, they can see some training just to assist them going forward after sort of their face-to-face training. I think that's probably everything. I mean, there's loads in here, but I won't keep boring you with it. I'll stop sharing my screen.
It's great, Laura. I love how organised that is. The colour coding.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned we also ISO 9001 compliant now. So on the back of having the wiki, we've managed to sort of get a quality management system that we've now been certified. So we've had an audit going through all of our procedures and everything checked like that. So but that sort of just helps us on that continual improvement journey.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Has anyone got any questions or want to talk any more about that with Laura? Tom?
Yeah, brilliant, Laura. Can I just ask one question around the training? Is all the content your own content, or do you sort of link out to any other sources?
It's mostly our own content. We have put some sort of links on there for useful sites. I'm trying to think particularly around sort of conservation, B&E. We put some links in there. So, you know, it's like, if you want to know more, read this, then it takes you off. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jan.
Yeah, this looks amazing. We've got something similar. We use Microsoft Teams to create our sort of manual. It's got lots of folders and bits of data, but it's nowhere near this sort of pretty and organized. The graphs and the sort of metrics that you've got in there, are they something that's generated within SharePoint, or are you using like Power BI or something external to create those?
So this is where I really could have done with my technical resource. I can certainly find out. I think it's Chart.js. So it's running off the uniform application server and pulling the data down. We've created some sort of warehouse tables with Enterprise to make it quicker. So it's not reading the sort of live data, but they're updated like every hour. So Power BI was looked at. We're still trying to work out as a authority what we're doing with licensing around Power BI. So because we haven't been able to publish the data using Power BI because not everyone has licenses. So we haven't been able to take that route, although that would have probably been an easier route for us. But we're still waiting to hear what we're doing as an authority.
Great, thanks. And we had a question from Andrew as well in the chat. What kind of officer capacity was required to get to this stage and to maintain it?
So we already had quite a lot of procedures, like we say, and it has been a work in progress probably over 2 years now. We came up with the idea, we built it, and then we've kind of created sort of super users within each area team to say, right, can you be responsible for getting this up to date, getting your procedures on, we'll hold your hand. So we've got 2 system officers that have been working on building particularly like the dashboards and things like that, and that has been quite a large chunk of work, especially to get it as pretty as it is. So yeah, it's certainly an investment in time, but I would say it's 100% worth it once you get to this stage and you're really just kind of building on it now. It really is very useful, and all council staff have, or all the planning staff have buy-in. So they really want this, and so they will. Nice thing is you can comment at the bottom. So if you're reading a process, you're following a process, and you actually think, oh, hang on a minute, that's just something missing, there's a stage missing. They can just type in a comment, and that comment gets sent through then to the person that wrote that page, and then they can go back and review it. So it's sort of quite interactive as well.
Brilliant, thank you. One more from Richard. Comment to say this looks great. Was it led on from within planning or IT?
Planning. Yeah, so it was quite because the shared service had come together. It was very much like, right, we have a problem here, what are we going to do? We really need something, and because we were all working from home, we needed something that was going to be a central, easy resource. And so we did ask IT to come up with some sort of ideas for us so we could work with them and what platforms would be best to host it, and we came up with this one in the end. And then yeah, we're now trying to roll it out a little bit across the council. So we're showing other service areas like revenues and benefits. They've just sort of started one. Our shared waste service are building theirs at the moment. So hopefully it will be quite consistent across the board then.
Good stuff. All right, thanks, Laura. That's really good to hear all about that. Thank you. And thanks for all the questions and comments. It's really good to hear as well.